The coffin descended into the ground as Adayeze collapsed, her screams piercing the air. "Chukwuma cannot be dead. He cannot." Her sisters-in-law stood nearby, one checking her watch, the other already on her phone, texting someone with a half-smile. None of them noticed the new driver standing at the back of the crowd, watching everything with unblinking eyes. Chukwuma Okonkwo stepped out onto the balcony of his penthouse apartment overlooking the gleaming skyline of Lagos. At 45, he had everything a man could want: a tech empire worth billions of naira, 3 beautiful wives, and respect that commanded attention anywhere in Nigeria. Yet something gnawed at him. "Oga, your meeting starts in 30 minutes, his assistant Obinna said, interrupting his thoughts. "Tell them I'll be late," Chukwuma replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I need to think." As CEO of Afritech Solutions, Chukwuma had risen from the bustling streets of Yaba to become one of Nigeria's most powerful tech entrepreneurs. His first marriage to Adayeze happened before his wealth, when he was still hustling with his startup in a small office. She had believed in him when nobody did. 5 years into their marriage, as success began to flow, he married Blessing, a beauty queen who brought social connections. 2 years later came Ifeoma, the daughter of a political heavyweight whose family opened doors to government contracts. Now, with his empire secure, a question haunted him. Did any of his wives truly love him, or just his money and power? That evening, Chukwuma sat with his childhood friend Ikenna at an exclusive rooftop bar in Victoria Island. "These women, do they really love me, or just what I provide?" Chukwuma asked, swirling his drink. Ikenna laughed. "Bros, you think too much. Enjoy what you have." "I need to know, Ikenna. I need to be sure." "How will you know? Ask them?" Ikenna snorted. Chukwuma's eyes narrowed. "No, I'll show them my death." The plan took shape over the next week. With Ikenna's help, Chukwuma arranged for news of a fatal car accident to spread. His body would be too damaged to be viewed. Meanwhile, he would disguise himself as a new driver in his household, observing his wife's reactions. Dr. Namdi, his personal physician and trusted friend, helped create medical documents confirming his death. His lawyer, Chibuzo, was instructed to delay reading the will for 2 weeks, time enough for Chukwuma to learn the truth. The news broke on a Friday evening. Chukwuma watched from the guest house as ambulances arrived at his mansion. He had shaved his signature beard, darkened his skin tone slightly with makeup, and wore colored contacts. No one would recognize the tech mogul in this ordinary-looking driver named Emeka. The household erupted in chaos. The staff wailed. Security guards stood stunned. And his 3 wives? Their reactions began to tell the story he had been afraid to learn. Adayeze, his first wife, collapsed when she heard the news. For 3 days, she refused to eat or see anyone. Through the keyhole, Chukwuma watched her sob in their bedroom, clutching his clothes to her chest. "Why did you leave me?" she whispered to his photo. "We started with nothing. I wanted nothing but you." Her grief was raw, unfiltered, and unmistakably genuine. It tore at Chukwuma's heart to see her suffer, but he needed to see the others before revealing himself. Blessing, his second wife, initially showed great distress. She organized the funeral arrangements meticulously, speaking tearfully to reporters about her beloved husband. But by the 3rd day, Chukwuma, now Emeka the driver, overheard her on the phone with her brother. Of course I'm sad, but we must be practical, she said, pacing in her private sitting room. The shares will be divided among us wives. I've already spoken to Tunda at the bank. With my portion, I can take controlling interest in the media division. She paused, listening. No, Ifoma is too busy planning her next marriage to care about the business. And Adaeze, that village girl doesn't understand high finance. I'll easily outmaneuver her. Chukwuma felt cold rage building inside him. 6 years of marriage, and this was her true face. Ifeoma, his third and youngest wife, surprised him the most. Before the funeral was even arranged, he caught her in the garden, speaking quietly to Senator Ekweme's son. It's awful timing, I know, she said, touching the man's arm. But Chukwuma and I were never really close. You know it was a family arrangement. How soon would it be respectable to announce our engagement? The man asked. Ifeoma smiled. Give it 3 months for appearance's sake. By then, I'll have secured my inheritance. The man kissed her hand. My father will be pleased. The merger of our family's interests will be even stronger than what you had with Okonkwo. Chukwuma had suspected Ifeoma's affections weren't genuine, but he hadn't expected such immediate betrayal. They had been married barely 4 years. The funeral was grand, as befitting a man of his stature. Government officials, business leaders, and celebrities filled the church. Chukwuma watched from behind the wheel of one of the family cars, observing his 3 wives. Adaeze could barely stand, supported by her sisters. Her face showed a week of sleepless nights and tears. Blessing maintained perfect composure, accepting condolences with dignified nods. Ifeoma dapped her eyes occasionally with a handkerchief, though Chukwuma had yet to see an actual tear. At the burial site, when Adaeze collapsed at the graveside, Chukwuma nearly broke his cover to comfort her. The sight of her pain became almost unbearable. After the funeral, the household settled into uneasy grief. As Emeka the driver, Chukwuma had access to most areas of the compound. He watched as Blessing began making calls to board members. He observed Ifeoma gradually removing her photos with him from her quarters, and he saw Adaeze refuse visits from potential suitors her family had already begun to suggest. It's too soon, he overheard her tell her mother. I don't care about his money. The lawyers can take everything. I just want more time with his memory. 10 days after his death, Chukwuma had seen enough. He texted Ekena, "End it tonight." The 3 wives were summoned to the main living room by Chibuzo, the family lawyer. They were told there was an urgent matter regarding the will. "Ladies, thank you for coming," Chibuzo said formally. "Before we proceed with the official will reading tomorrow, there is something you need to know." The doors opened, and Chukwuma walked in, not as Emeka the driver, but as himself. Blessing gasped. Ifeoma's hand flew to her throat. Adaeze simply stared, colour draining from her face. "What kind of joke is this?" Blessing demanded, finding her voice first. "Not a joke," Chukwuma said quietly. "A test." Adaeze swayed and sat down hard on the sofa. "You were alive? All this time?" "I needed to know the truth," he said, looking at each of them. "Now I do." What followed was chaos. Ifeoma tried to deny her betrayal. Blessing argued that her business moves were only to protect his legacy. Both eventually stormed out when Chukwuma revealed exactly what he had seen and heard. Adaeze remained seated, tears flowing silently down her face. "You let me suffer," she whispered. "You watched me grieve. I had to know," he said, kneeling before her. "I had to be sure." "And now you are," Her voice was hollow. Was it worth it? Chukwuma had no answer. The truth he sought had come at a terrible price. The next morning, news broke across Lagos that Chukwuma Okonkwo was alive. The story given to the press involved a security threat that had forced him to fake his death. Most people accepted this explanation. Nigeria was no stranger to dramatic business rivalries and political power plays. Within a month, Chukwuma had divorced Blessing and Ifoma. The settlements were generous but firm. His lawyers made sure both women understood that any challenge would result in the real story becoming public. With Adaeze, the path to reconciliation was much harder. She moved out of the main house into their first apartment in Yaba, where they had lived when they were just starting out. "I need time," she told him. "You broke my trust." Chukwuma respected her decision. He sent no gifts, made no grand gestures. Instead, he wrote her letters, handwritten accounts of their early days, his fears, his regrets. He visited once a week, never pressing, simply being present. "I understand now," he told her during one visit, "that love doesn't need tests, it needs nurturing." 3 months passed. One evening, Chukwuma arrived at her apartment to find her cooking his favorite soup, ofe aku. "I'm still angry," she said as she set the table, "but I'm ready to talk about building something new." "Something true," he added. Adaeze nodded. "No more tests." "No more tests," he agreed. They ate together, talking late into the night about hurt, forgiveness, and second chances, about rebuilding a marriage on honesty rather than suspicion, about the difference between loving someone and loving what they provide. A year later, Chukwuma's business had evolved. He had stepped back from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on mentoring young tech entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. Adaeze had returned to her passion for education, opening learning centers across Lagos. They lived not in the mansion, but in a comfortable home in Lekki, large enough for family, but modest by his former standards. Their relationship had deepened through the pain, emerging stronger for having been tested almost to breaking. "Was it worth it?" Adaeze asked him again one night as they sat on their balcony, watching the Lagos sunset. Chukwuma considered the question he couldn't answer a year ago. "No," he said finally. "I should have trusted what we had, but I'm grateful for where we are now." She took his hand. The truth can hurt, but lies hurt more in the end. As darkness fell over the city, they sat in comfortable silence. No more tests, no more doubts, just the steady certainty of love that had survived its greatest challenge. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more exciting stories from the heart of Africa.